Intuition, to believe or not to believe. There are many people out there who do not believe in intuition. They can't wrap their head around it, or they don't see the logic behind it. They don't understand it. And so it must not exist. And yet it does. It does exist. And from talking to many of these types of people over the past number of years, I also understand that many of these people want to believe. And of course they would want to believe. When we're tapped into our intuition, our intuitive self, then we're able to connect with the truth. We're able to connect with greater clarity and are able to have the inside track on situations for decision making that affect us in every area of our life. Of course, we want to believe in intuition and we need to believe in intuition. It can affect our life paths greatly. Albert Einstein said the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. We can look back and see how in society, of course, we do put a lot of importance on our logical mind, on our rational mind, on knowledge and facts and information. And while we're not going to be throwing that out the window anytime soon, we can also see in the recent past what a great importance we have been putting on connecting with our intuition, connecting with our intuitive self. And why wouldn't we? When we have both of these minds working for us, then we are more powerful on our life path going forward, 100%. Albert Einstein also said the only real valuable thing is intuition. I think it's worth diving in a little deeper and exploring, don't you? One of the big myths about intuition is that while people might understand that it is a gift, and it absolutely is, that it is a gift that's only given to a very select few. That is absolutely not the case. Intuition is a gift, but every single person is gifted with this ability, with this skill set. Now, certain people find it easier to tap into their intuition at the onset. Absolutely. And this could be because of varying life experiences growing up, or maybe they just have a more open mind. Perhaps their frame of reference growing up, they were supported in connecting with their feelings and emotions and dream images and so on. And so they can more easily connect with their intuitive self on an ongoing basis. And that's great. Perfect. Terrific. But for the people who find it a little bit more difficult, well, I want to share with you that it's a little bit like going to the gym. Now, if I'm going to go to the gym, perhaps I'm good at doing a core workout, at some Pilates, while other people are better at lifting weights or doing aerobics or better on the elliptical or running and so on. Certain people have hidden strengths and initial strengths where other people have to work at it. Maybe I have to work at my cardio so I can be as fast on the treadmill as other people. And when I go to the gym, while I'm great at doing Pilates or doing those crunches, I may not have six-pack abs on the very first day that I go. But if I go every day to the gym or a few days a week to the gym and do my 500 crunches while I'm there and then come home and eat healthfully, then before long I will have those six-pack abs because I had an awareness, I had a plan, and I stayed vigilant and persevered every single day doing exercises in order to strengthen myself in an area where I was a little weaker in. Before long, I am strong in that area and it feels good. So for us, with our intuition, it's also true that if we do daily exercises and are aware in many cases of how we are already connecting with our intuitive self, and then do daily exercises in order to hone in on that awareness so that we may become open to receiving more intuitive messaging, then before long we are connecting with all of our intuitive skills and decision-making, life path becomes much easier and clearer. Many people are already connecting with their intuition, but they don't necessarily even recognize it. The way intuition generally gets our attention is through inner knowings and gut instincts. Even if you don't recognize that you're connecting with your intuition, all of us have had those inner knowings, that gut feel about whether we should make this decision or that decision. And this is 100% our intuition getting our buy-in, getting our attention. We're recognizing whether it's a physical sensations that we are undergoing or our emotions are telling us that we need to go to this place or not go to that place, whether we need to take the job opportunity or not take the job opportunity. That gut instinct is intuition. We receive random messages all the time, but many times when we have a feeling about something or someone else, whether we take the job or we don't take the job, or somebody else shares what they think might happen, and it happens, we put it down to coincidence or lucky guess or synchronicity. We just wave it away. Every time we wave our intuition away, then we build a wall where our intuition has a more difficult time coming through to us the next time. It's so important that when we receive an inner knowing, an inner instinct, that we acknowledge it as such. And as we acknowledge it, we become more aware of it. And as we become more aware of our intuitive feelings and our intuitive inner knowings, then we receive more of them and our intuition strengthens. And very often when we're faced with a decision, we will sit down with a pen and paper or on our laptops and list out the pros and the cons. Why should I make this decision this way? Why shouldn't I make that decision this way? Should I take the job? Should I not take the job? Should we move house? Should we not move house? And it doesn't always have to be big life-changing decisions like that. You can list pros and cons, of course, for any decision that you're meant to make, whether it's for your job or relationship or for a personal decision. Should I take the vacation or should I not take the vacation? I say take the vacation, but weighing out the pros and cons is a great way to connect with your logical and your rational mind, and that has to be looked at. But once you have done that, then when you have built a steady practice of connecting with your intuition, you can just shift that pencil and paper just a little bit farther away from you. When you're in tune with your intuition, you can just sit quietly, breathe in deeply, exhale. This, of course, stills your mind and brings you away from that busy beta brain and down into your alpha state, which is where we are more able to connect with our intuitive self. And as we say, we sit with it. We think about this decision and we notice how our physical self is reacting. When we think about taking the new job, does our physical sense tense up? How do we feel? Do we feel excited? Do we feel a little bit edgy or nervous, tense, or even a little bit sick? Is our stomach churning at the thought of it? Those are all intuitive messaging, reaching down into your emotions, connecting with your physical self, and you can see and feel your shoulders tensing up and your breath shortening. And so these are intuitive instincts, intuitive feelings, intuitive emotions that your intuitive self is sending to your physical and emotional self in order to give you the message, the intuitive message to take the job or don't take the job. Following your instincts at the end of the day is much more powerful, many times, than looking at facts and figures and looking at the pros and the cons. Do I say completely follow your intuitive self? No, I wouldn't recommend that. Nor would I recommend completely going on knowledge, and certainly ignoring intuitive self is really not an option and should not be an option with many decisions, big and small. Finding that balance and giving your instinct, your inner instinct, your gut feelings, your intuitive self, as much clout as the knowledge and the facts and the figures and the pros and the cons is an absolutely balanced and successful way in order to be able to make successful decisions going forward. When you're giving your intuitive self as much weight as your knowledgeable self, as your rational self, Rather than thinking through decisions or looking at opportunities with only your rational mind, carefully considering each factor in the situation and working through a step by step process, you're actually able to connect with your higher self through your intuition. Your higher self is very easily able to see situations as a whole and therefore come to a conclusion in a more conceptual way. The intuition is very, very connected with your emotions and your physical self and will give you that answer once you sit with that information in order to round out the big picture. So, your top 3 steps in order to be able to connect with your intuition is understanding, recognizing, and interpreting. Understanding what intuition is, recognizing signs and symbols as you go forward, and then being able to understand and appreciate and interpret the guidance from the signs and symbols that you're receiving. When we understand how our intuition comes to us, how we receive certain messages, then we're able to be aware of what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're hearing, and recognize that it's not random things that we're generally coming into contact with, that we're coming across in our daily life. But many times they are actually intuitive messages that are coming to us in order to help us going forward. Understanding how you receive your intuitive guidance is key. Everybody is a little bit different on how they connect with their intuition. People are stronger in certain areas than others, and so it's important to recognize how you receive messages and be aware of how those messages are coming to you. In this case, we're talking about claircognizance, which is the gateway for us to connect with our intuitive self. We have been talking about inner knowings, gut instincts, and so on. This is all claircognizance, recognizing your inner instincts. And to a certain extent, under claircognizance, we're also connecting with our emotions. How do we feel about this situation? How are we reacting from a physical standpoint? If we're thinking about moving to a new career opportunity and our physical self, as we were saying, gets tense and we don't feel very excited at all about moving to our new position, then our intuitive self is probably telling us to stay put. So understanding how your physical self reacts and responds when you connect in certain situations for intuitive guidance. And this can come completely out of the blue. I remember a few years ago when I was going to buy a new car. I was at the dealership and the car was it was a great car and it was a good price. And I was in the office with the salesperson and my husband was there. And I wanted a couple of days just to think about it. It was just going to take some time over the weekend. I wasn't logically and rationally, I wasn't quite sure on whether that was the car for me. I just wanted to sit with it for a bit, just to see how I felt about it. I wanted to connect with my intuitive self, but it was so busy at the dealership, and I was just a little bit overwhelmed with all the information that I just needed some time. And the sales agent said, well, sure, if you just give me your license and some information, I can get the paperwork started over the weekend, just so that if on Monday you decide that we're going to go ahead and get that car, then we'll already be halfway there. And I said, okay, yes, that's fine. And she looked at me, and I sat there in the chair, and I really wasn't able to bend down and get my purse and get my wallet, and I was just frozen in the chair. And she said, so will you just pass me your license and I'll get a copy of it? And I said, no. I understood, because my physical self was not moving. That was my gut instinct. That was my physical self freezing up intuitively, because no, this process was not going to be started. Do not hand over your license. Do not get anything even moving in that direction, because there's a better car out there for you. Sure enough, on the Sunday, my husband and I were going out for some dim sum, which was lovely. Um, and then on our way back to our house, we noticed that there was a clearance car area open, and all the dealerships in the auto park were closed, except this clearance area was open for business. And there were 3 or 4 cars there that I just loved. I could have had any one of them, and the price was outstanding, and the features in the car were unbelievable. And within about 45 minutes, I had completed the paperwork. It was just dynamite, and we were away to the races. So that's an example on how we can understand as we get a little further along in our knowledge, connecting with our physical self, connecting with our emotions, knowing that when our body responds or does not respond, or then we can take that as an intuitive message, as guidance from our intuitive self. Recognizing signs and symbols. Very often we will receive recurring signs and symbols, whether they are things that we see visually, clairvoyantly in our physical daily life, or whether we have recurring instincts, recurring emotions. It's important to be able to recognize on a regular basis the things that you are seeing, feeling, and undergoing from an instinctual perspective, or even hearing different signs and symbols, messages that you might previously have thought of as coincidence, or simply hearing the same message all the time, or simply going through the same feelings when you enter into your colleague's office. You always feel this way, or good, or you always feel poorly when you walk into someone else's office. These are all repetitive signs and symbols that and feelings and emotions and inner instincts that can allow you to become more in tune with the messages that you're being given on a daily basis. I encourage people to keep track of the recurring signs and symbols that you're receiving, feeling, or undergoing. Keep a little log, keep a jot notebook of those very feelings, of those inner instincts, and that will help you to recognize that at the end of the month, it's like, holy cow, I have experienced 30, 40, 50 different situations, different recurring messages that I previously would have just written off as coincidence. Maybe I'm more intuitive than I think. Then at the end of the month, you can start to recognize the common denominator between different signs and symbols, between different recurring patterns and messages. In this way, this little jot notebook, by recognizing these types of signs and symbols, you are adding to your awareness, and your intuitive self is getting more and more of your buy-in. Interpreting the messages that you receive from the signs and symbols. This is where many people get a little bit frustrated, in that they know that they're receiving recurring messages, and yet they're not able to always interpret the meaning behind it. Now, sometimes the meaning is obvious. If you go to Starbucks and you're standing in line and the people ahead of you are talking about taking tennis lessons, and you think, oh, that's nice. And then you are at home and an ad for a new tennis facility comes on the radio, and you think, oh, interesting, another tennis message, and I wonder if that's where the ladies are going to do their tennis lessons, and I wonder what the prices are on their tennis lessons, and so on. And then later on that day, the phone rings and a friend of yours asks you if you would like to take tennis lessons with them. They're signing up. Then certainly there's not much of interpretation that's necessary with this scenario. Clearly, you're meant to take some tennis lessons. And so, yeah, absolutely. Follow those messages and take the lessons, because a further opportunity will more than likely come up to you from following your instincts, following the messaging on this line. Other signs and symbols can be a little bit more difficult to interpret, and it just takes practice and vigilance. And If you'd like to connect with me on a more in-depth level, I do now have a monthly membership site called The Key that we do explore how to interpret intuitive guidance, how to do energy clearings, and so much more on a weekly and monthly basis. And I do invite you into that online community. Check it out on my website, staceymacdonald.ca. I would look forward to welcoming you there. But for the meantime, keeping that notebook of recognized signs and symbols, and then looking at the repetitive messages and seeing what some similarities are in between certain messages will allow you to be able to connect with the interpretation of that message more easily. When you're connected with your intuition, you do have the inside track. By understanding instinct, inner knowing is a gateway to being able to connect with all of your intuitive abilities. This is where you get your buy-in, and once you are acknowledging your ability to receive regular, random guidance through gut instinct and inner knowings, your abilities will become stronger and your intuitive message will become more frequent, and soon you'll be receiving clear messages which will guide you forward in all areas of your life, relationships, career, finances, and more. Now, of course, inner instinct and gut feelings, otherwise known as claircognizance, are merely the tip of the iceberg when we're looking to connect with our intuition. There's clairaudience, clairsentience, and of course, clairvoyance that absolutely tips us off to our inner messages and universal messages for us that will guide us forward powerfully, even more clearly than claircognizance. However, when we're looking at our question, to believe or not to believe, certainly it's claircognizance, that inner instinct that you'll be able to connect with immediately and recognize that you have received these messages, these intuitive messages so many times in the past that as far as our question goes, you've just got to believe. And why wouldn't you? I'm Stacey Macdonald, and thank you so much for joining me.